All right, welcome back, everybody, to one of my favorite times of the month, and that is our crossover episode with Mr. Brett Young. What's going on, man?
What is up, man? How are you?
Good, good. I think we probably have missed a couple here, but it's good to be back on. These are always fun.
So good. So good to be back. Good to hear your voice. Good to see your face. I'm excited to rip.
Yeah, dude. So this is actually really exciting for me because I love what you guys do in many regards, but particularly around what you guys did. Is it last week, 2 weeks ago, in your leadership summit, which I personally think is super unique in our industry. I know that there's versions of this out there, right? But I don't hear about it too often in our industry, and I think what you guys are doing as it relates to culture and empowerment of your people, personal development, all of those things, this is a big piece of that, I would imagine. And I think you guys are certainly ahead of the game in that regard. And I think it's something that our industry needs to evolve into, right? Less, you know, that product sales, get out and sell the insurance product to, how do we empower people to be the
Mm.
best versions of themselves, not only our employees, but our clients, so on and so forth. So, yeah, what give everybody an overview of what you guys like. How did the leadership summit? What is it, and how did it come to be? Like, how is the even initial thought there to do something like this?
Yeah, that's a cool summer. That's a great summary, by the way. And that's it right there. I mean, you could probably shut the tape on it right now. The leadership summit came about from instead of putting on the event, sitting in the seats of the event, being an attendee of the event, and so it was one of the major components that we learned from some of the mentors that we kind of grew affixed to and learned from and kind of poured into us, that getting to a live event just does something different to your soul. A good live event allows you to connect the dots on things that you're working on. You think about all the projects that you have in your office, that you have in your agency, that you have going on with different departments, with your service team, your executive team, the sales team, your marketing, everything that you have going on, all those objectives. Everybody's looking to be tactical,
Yep.
but most of the time, not everybody's thinking strategic, and the big picture gets lost in all the to-dos, and there's not a fundamental underlining current that connects the whole organization. You can send out videos, you could send out emails, you can continue to remind people, but usually the overall big objective and mission of a company is more field driven than it is intellectually driven. It's usually a noble cause. It's usually something for a greater purpose. It's usually something to make an impact. And so that is very different, and it gets diluted when it becomes objectives and bullet points in an email or on a
Hmm.
page. And when you get to a live event, and if you do it right, it allows you get emotionally captured into what you're doing, and you get to see testimonials. You get to see it start to play out. You get to see other people's successes, and it basically objectifies this intangible, feeling driven thing. And if you do it right, from what we've learned, is that it just creates it ignites a group of people. And it's no different in the insurance space or in the business space than it is with a church gathering. It's no different whether it's a political gathering. It could be any type of pursuit or organizational pursuit, if you will. When you congregate a bunch of people together that are all looking to, and you objectify what they're here for and what the reason is, it creates just this stimulus that's very difficult to get unless you're at a live event. So it came about from just us being affixed to some really good mentors that felt live events was a fundamental component to building a successful big team. Um, and through that process, our original summit had the three of us. It was three people. We sat around in a room, and we had a 2-day event, and that was it. and it was like, what are we going to do for the year? What's the mission? I gave a keynote, which we sat down, and it was through a book, and we went through some stuff, and then it was 4 people. Then it was 6 people. Then it was 7 people. Then it was 8 people. And now this year, it was about 43 employees, over 100 people as far as family was
Mhm.
concerned. But it's like, it's the same components. We go through the same things, the same framework that we did 10 years ago. It's just evolved because obviously, if you have 3 buckets, it's the same framework. What's in the buckets changed, but the ideology and the reason why you do it and the way you do it hasn't really changed. So I think it's a competitive advantage that has evolved. But what I love about it is it's not really anything special. It's just hard to do because it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of commitment, and so it's just hard to stick to. But I mean, luckily, I have 2 unbelievable partners that believe the same things that I believe, and we're all on the same page. That it's not a matter of if we're doing the summit every year; it's a matter of when
Mhm.
we're doing it, what we're doing it, how we're doing it, and all the above.
Yeah. Well, I don't wanna discount it because it is something special in what I know about it, so I wanna give you guys all the
Thanks,
props
man.
in the world, but
Appreciate
I
that.
think that, you know, I feel like people think though about summits as external, meaning like if they're going to put on an event, it's usually for clients,
Mm,
and I even think about this with us that again is unique to how you guys have built like your level of a summit is what most people would think they're putting on for like some massive client
yeah.
event.
Right.
And again, not they should do those things, don't get me wrong, but that's where I think it's so impactful is, this is something you guys have done and put together to build and empower your team and bring them together in such a big way that most people don't even think about it. Like we do a holiday party every year. And like actually, since our conversations, we're going to be doing some more things around that, mocking some of it off of you guys, nothing to that level, but, dipping our toe in the water of like, how can we
Hmm.
create more meaning behind something that is awesome and needs to happen and getting your whole team together. And we have 4
Yeah.
locations and that's, it doesn't happen that often and it is important. But
Yeah.
creating some of the personal development and that constant learner type of mentality that something like this can be a cornerstone of is
Yeah.
something we've even been working towards slowly.
That's cool.
But yeah, we're
That's cool.
start somewhere like you said, and you figure it out, you learn, you iterate and try new
Yeah.
things, but
I think if I could sum up the biggest reason I think it's powerful and the biggest lift is belief. Uh, if someone has a big belief, they're willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do. They're more resilient. They're willing to figure it out. They're willing to grab as many books to find the solutions. They want to be part of solutions instead of being part of the problem. Like the price is worth it because the prize is so big.
mhm,
And so if you can get a group of people that buy in and that believe, like big belief, it's hard to quantify what that means from a
right,
revenue perspective. It's hard to quantify what that means of you not having to be the like uh, uh, I'm sure you can relate to this. It's like at one point in time, didn't you feel like maybe you're the only one that could solve a problem within the
mhm,
agency? But what would happen if you had your entire organization that was equipped and wanted and took ownership over solving a lot of that stuff? So it's like the lift that comes from giving that bigger perspective of why am I here and why is this worth it and why is this unique and special is just hard to really put down on a P&L,
well, you
and
can't, but it's one of the
and you're
most
not going to
important things.
right, and you're not going to get the return in a quarter. You're not going to get the return in 2 quarters. You may not even get it in a year, but quantified over a long period of time, that repetition is just it's just a momentum shift that is hard to put into words. And I mean, I felt that this year at our event. It was just like it was like a culmination. I mean, like to give you perspective, I mean, we spent maybe an hour and a half in split ops and marketing and sales, and we did a high level, extensive hour and a half training, nuts and bolts on that aspects of the business. The other parts of the 2 days had like they were very little to do with insurance. I mean,
Mhm.
it's where we came from. What's the story? Why are we here? Why is it important? How do you fit into that? Do you know what that looks like? Do you, that value proposition, are you able to articulate that? Why is there, is there patterns in your story with the company story, and what can you learn from that? Hearing from different team members of where they came from and where they are now, what challenges they came across, how they overcame them, what their background is. So now everybody in the audience is seeing themselves in these people, saying, man, they did it and they have the same background as me and they had the same problem as me. Belief, belief, belief,
Mhm.
right? And then we go through, what has happened this year, very minimally, like wins and losses, and what can we do better, and all the good stuff that would be at a normal summit. And then, we set the sail for next year. But the biggest, coolest part of the whole event, embedded throughout the whole thing, is someone in the audience, or someone that's a new team member, or even if they've been here for a couple years, can look up on the stage and say, well, they did it, or they're the same, or they had the same problem, or they're feeling the same way that I feel right now. Oh, that's normal. And this is what is available. And oh, this is why this is unique. Like, people they need more gas in the tank, like we run it
Mhm.
hard. And like, we just forget that everyone's always asking the question, what's in it for me? And
Yep.
why is this worth it? And you know, that that wick runs out. There's a time limit on that wick until someone needs to get refueled. They need to get, they need to get poured into. So, for us, we do it every 6 months. We used to do one annual summit, and that was it. And we've now realized that there's just not enough of that. So we do a summer bash, but that's more fun than anything else. But either way, it allows people to go, damn, okay, this is why I'm here. Like, this is
Mhm.
what we're doing. This makes sense. Okay, cool. And so it collectively, it helps with buying. Collectively, it helps with them staying on track with their goals. It helps them remember what they're fighting for. And then, organizationally, like for us, it allows us to, groom leaders.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean,
Yeah.
if you have good leaders, they can think a year out. You're able to think 5 years out. If you don't have good leaders thinking tactically for the quarter and a year, then you're not going to be able to think 5, 10 years out. You're going to be so consumed with the problems today that you just don't have the ability to do that. So it's been a huge, I think it's been a huge game changer for us. It's a lot of work, but it's 100% the most fulfilling moment of the year for me, is just watching all the emotion and just the fun and the light bulbs come on and the connection and people making cool relationships. Um, it's been fun, man. It's a cool event.
Yeah. That's sweet. And I think, the how do I want to put this? Like what you were talking about, the return that you get is is not quantifiable to some degree in this, right? But you can feel it,
Yeah.
is what you're talking about. And like you feel it as a leader when you're talking about, like using a simple example, like sometimes in organizations you can get those pockets of negativity, right? Or conversations that can go negative, right?
Mhm.
Somebody doesn't agree with a decision that was made, and they start talking to a coworker, and then that spreads, type of thing. But when you have the overwhelming majority of your people that believe in the broader belief and mission and understand that, yeah, decisions aren't always going to be made perfectly, but hey, you want those people that can go to that person and say, hey, you may not be looking at that correctly. Why don't you go talk to Brett and just like, I think he can help
Yes.
understand that better. Like,
Yep.
and just kind of cut that off and keep the positivity and the belief around what you're doing, because everybody's going to get that way at some point, right? It's
Yep.
natural. We're humans. But
Yep.
you need a support system around you, and like you can't be
Yes.
everywhere at once, right?
Yeah,
And so
and
you
and
need
I,
that
I
army.
can't communicate the message because I'm
Yeah.
biased. Like, my message is biased. If I'm talking to a team member and I say something, they may listen, but it's going to come with some level of
Yeah.
bias. If they get it from another team member, when they're having a cocktail after the event, at one of the after events, and they hear it the same way from a different person, all of a sudden their belief goes through the roof, right? Because
Yep.
there's not as much bias around it. So, to point, even if I could be everywhere and my partners could be everywhere, there's the level of effectiveness of doing that diminishes significantly over time because they know that it comes from a bias, right? Like, and I think events are the ultimate third party, right? What we're talking about is hearing it from another person.
Yeah.
But events do what you want to be able to do that you just like so frustrated because someone doesn't get it. It's like, why don't they get it? I've said it a
Mhm.
hundred times. They just why don't they see it? You could have an event and just put some production value on it and say the exact same thing, and the light bulb comes on for someone and says, "Oh man, that makes sense." Because there's something about having a third party um, utility that delivers a message so much better than you can, because it doesn't come with the same level of bias when it comes directly from your mouth, unfortunately.
Oh, it's so spot on. And the human connection, I can imagine, drives a lot of that too, where you've got people in the same room that are, like you said, oh, they're experiencing that. And, those two have a conversation about what they just heard, and it just is
Yeah.
going to build belief as you go. And I think that's important even for young, smaller, growing firms to be building that foundation from the start. And like you said, it doesn't have to be some massive grand event to start.
Yep.
It's you three in a room for 2 days and following, your model
Yep.
as to how you're going to do it. And
Yep.
I don't think that that's, usually not given enough emphasis, because we're all, we get in, it's head down, we got to build a business, and I got to take care of clients, I got to bring on new clients, I got to keep the lights on, right?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
maybe talk through that side of it for you guys before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of how you do it, as much as you want to. But like, how was it ever a challenge in your mind to be able to spend the time, resources, and frankly the cash to
Yeah.
be able to do this? Like, I'd imagine at some point you guys are like, holy shit, like,
Yeah.
are we gonna be able to do
Yeah.
this type of thing? I mean, walk through that psychology.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't think it ever goes away, because if you're doing it right, you're growing, and then every year you're like, wow, that's the bill,
Yeah.
um, I mean, this year is no doubt no different. I mean, I was just like, wow, this is well, this
Expensive.
is us. We're doing this. Like, I was talking to you before we turned the camera on. I walked in, and this room, it's this big room, and it was beautifully set up. It was amazing. I was like, hold on, is this just us? It's like you forget, because you're just comparing it to the last year, but it's been 12 months. So I don't think that ever goes away. And I think it's the same way if you have 7 people. You're like,
Mhm.
if you're a young new firm and you're taking 7 people to dinner, you're like, damn, it's going to be a big bill.
Yeah.
Can we do this? Like I remember that for us, but we would do fun things, man, that wouldn't cost a lot of money. Like, my folks had a house down in St. James City, and they had this, and we had it was like a deck boat that they would have in the back, and they let us use the house. I remember them letting us use the house for a weekend, and we did it down there. And we woke everybody up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We didn't tell anybody, but we woke them up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we handed them something, and it was a scroll, and it had something really cool, and it was about their dreams, and it was about a lot of cool stuff that was more personal development driven. And we got on the boat at 4:30 in the morning in the pitch black, and we drove out to the causeway and watched the sun come up. Now this is just 6 or 7 of us. Like, there's only 3 employees at the time, and we listened to a Les Brown tape, and we took this scroll, and they wrote out what they wanted, and they put it in the scroll in these old Coca-Cola bottles that we brought, and they threw it out into the ocean. And it was like this metaphorical way to signify that, like, your dreams matter here. And that's what this vehicle's about. You can have that, but you got to want it, and you got to go after it. And we're going to do it together. And it's us versus the world, right? We weren't some big firm that said, hey, we can have it's like, it's different today than it was then. But the value prop it was this different spin. It was us versus the world. So now it's not necessarily us versus the world, but at the same time, it was here. You can have what you want here, but that didn't cost anything.
Yeah.
That was creativity. Like, it was a couple gallons of gas and a borrowed boat. Get a good insurance policy, but besides that,
Do you know
it was
anybody?
creative. And I'm looking back at videos. It was one of the videos that I pulled because I was doing like a memory deal for the summits, and I was like, man, like, this stuff doesn't cost money. It just takes intention. It takes creativity. It takes you care. You have to make it a priority. So I think in the beginning stages, more than anything, it's way more about being creative and creating experiences for people and getting out of your own environment and disrupting the behavior of just the normal day to
Yeah.
day than it is about you throwing a cocktail party or going to an expensive. We never went to an expensive dinner, Elliot, ever, ever. We couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
We didn't. We would, we
Do
do these cool,
barbecues or,
yeah, we do these cool experiences, and then we would do it really, really inexpensively, but it still had the same impact. And like, those team members most of them are still here today, and we talk about how the fact, like, do you remember when? And there's fun in that because the message was it's us versus the world. We're not trying to pretend to be somebody we're not. We're saying that we're going to do something special together, right? So it wasn't like I was trying to prove, or my partners and I were trying to prove to them that they're in the right place because we can give them everything that they want. It was, no, collectively, we're all going to create something awesome together. So I would just say no, it doesn't go away, but creativity is a much better tool than cash. Um, and I think as you get bigger, it becomes challenging because you could throw cash at it instead of be creative. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that that's where we found where you got to be very careful that that's not what makes the summits memorable. It's not getting an open bar at a badass party, which we're going to do, but right? But but it is a threat to say, all right, well, let's just do all the normal things that a venue can support and let's throw money at it and be done. It's like, no, these events are about creativity, intention, and going deep. And if someone can see that you've put your heart and soul in it, and that it makes sense, there's an intention of why you're doing this, you're just going to get such better outcomes.
Hmm.
But I mean, this year, looking at how much we spent, it was a lot. And I think about it and I go, man, this is one event, one company. Like, and candidly, I don't know if we might do some sponsors next year, where we could try to offset
Hmm.
some of the cost and do it in a way where we could give, some spotlights. And because I think at this point now it would be very valuable for somebody. But either way, even if we didn't, I think it's just, if you look at it from a standpoint of return instead of cost, you're going to have a much better psyche about it. But also, if you try to go from 0 to 100, you're gonna be like, whoa, this is too much. This is too much of a budget item. But if you slowly build it up and you know that that's just part of the expense every year,
Yep.
you know, if it goes up 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, all of a sudden, like, we find ourselves at this big number, but it's not that much bigger than it was last year, right?
Yeah.
So
Percentage wise too, it's
yeah,
similar,
so
right? Yeah.
you're scaling it up, so it
Yeah.
becomes part of your operation instead of like, oh, okay, let's just do this now. So I think that was helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I loved what you said there about actually, having some cash can be detrimental almost, or dangerous to driving what you want out of it. And
Yeah.
sometimes, it's like a startup, right? Startups are a lot of times the successful ones are way more productive than the established businesses because they have to be.
Hmm.
They have to figure out ways to do things with less cash and whatnot. And I think, it's easy for people sometimes to look at what you guys have now and be like, oh, when we get there, we'll do stuff like that. Or,
Right.
it must be so nice to be, where you guys are at and be able to throw a big party like that. And I want to
Right.
encourage everybody to like take that step back, like you said, and start small, figure out a way to do something that drives the impact you want. And I think that's what I've always noticed with you guys too, is it wasn't about necessarily, and I'm gonna put words in your mouth for a second, so correct this if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like it's ever been about go like we're gonna go out and have fun, but that's not the intention. The intention is, this year we want to drive this feeling, this thing, this belief with our team. How do we do that? And
Yes.
then let's attach some fun around it, or let's do something to highlight that more effectively.
Yeah.
And that doesn't cost a thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You could sit in your office for a day and do that and literally not spend a dime. But
I'm
in
glad
it,
you said that because that's important. I mean, I think these events you could get, it's like an opportunity to get away, and that's important. But it's like, what is the message you want people to leave with?
yeah,
And what is the feeling that you want them? They're human beings, bro. We're all humans, like, and we have this emotional compass. And whether we want to believe it or not, or whether we're vulnerable enough to admit it or not, like, people are following you because they feel a certain way. They feel that what you do and them fitting into it is going to better their life in one aspect or 15 aspects. It doesn't matter. And so the message and the humanness of that is so important when you're leading a team, because without that it becomes stale. Without that it becomes technical. Without that it becomes mechanical. Without that it just becomes another company selling a bunch of products, right? Like, the human aspect of what building a team is about, is the secret sauce. And there's a lot of ways to do that. It's just our way of doing that. But I'm glad you say that, because we blow it out and we have an absolute blast. But that is not even close to the intention. The intention is for someone to leave and have this messaging been cemented throughout the process of 2-3 days, right?
Yep.
The messaging is integrated into the production value, whether it's the activities, whether it's the event, whether it's the theme, whether it's the breakouts that we do, whether it's the entertainment, whether it's surprises, whether it's things that are left in their room. Everything revolves around this one message, and it creates an immersive experience for the participant, to where they're just emotionally involved with that message. And when they leave, it's just a completely different uh, consumption or absorption of the message, rather than, let me just say this and
Mhm.
it'll just
Mhm.
stick, you know?
Yeah.
That's why live events are so powerful, because you just
Resonates.
absorb it. It becomes part of who you are. It's not just you're listening to it. It's just like now you're wrapped into it. And if anybody's ever been to a live event that's just capturing, even a
Yeah.
concert, like if you've ever been in a room full of, or a stadium full of this high level of emotion, it's just immersive. You're just
Yeah.
different when you leave. And so if you can create that experience, man, you win. It's hard, but if you create that, just you win. It's explosive.
Oh, totally. And I think this is important, more important now than ever. And because it just seems like there's a lot of forces that are pulling in the opposite direction, right? Of, you know, um, me against the machine. And, there's a lot of, and there's some businesses that deserve it at this point, right? But there isn't a lot of that. Like, you feel like there's this general messaging around, like, if you're an employee at a company, get your paycheck and go home and get a better opportunity somewhere else. Like,
Yep.
and I think it all stems from people and businesses and business owners not bringing something that people can get excited about, and it does become a transaction, right?
Sure.
They view them trading time for dollars,
Mhm.
and nobody gets out of bed to do that. I mean, they might need to pay their, or to feed their families and do all the things, but I think most people would agree they want something that they can get passionate about.
Sure.
And they get, when you talk about, your mission and, be extraordinary, they get a certain feeling about it, and like they get excited.
Thanks, man.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think people need that. And I don't know of a better way to drive it than what you guys are putting on. And so I think it's so cool to
Yeah, I
see.
mean, and I think it all comes back to, like, it's easy for us to look at and go, our team needs it. Man, shit, I need it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need it, right? These events are so powerful for me, because like you burn it, the candle, you burn it so hard, and you get to the end of the wick. And sometimes even I look up and I say, man, what am I fighting for here? Like, what are we doing here? I'm just getting my ass kicked every
Yeah.
day, and I know my partners feel like this. So it's like, I think it's about, like, if you looked internally, and the leaders that are listening to this podcast right now, like, look internally and ask yourself, like, what do you need from a business? And if you're the business owner, it's easy to say, well, it's different for me, because it's like, it's not though. It's not. Whatever you need, it's the same thing as someone else. They may not want to be the entrepreneur and take the risk
Yeah.
and put their livelihood in danger and go out and carve this path and take this burden for bigger upside. Most people do not want to do that,
Mhm.
but the emotional reasons and needs that you have for getting up every single day and coming into your place of establishment is the same needs that somebody needs that you're hiring from day one. They are. They're emotional human needs. And if you can tap into what that is, and if you can be vulnerable enough to ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Like, what do I need? Like, start there. Like when we were doing the summits and it was just the three of us, like, what do we need? Like, what is the practice
Yeah.
for us? It was always from a filter of, like, one day there will be an army of people, but we are those people now.
Mhm.
And if it's good enough to do it with our teams, well, then it's damn good enough to do it with us, because it either works or it doesn't. And if it works, then we need to practice that internally. So I think you could get caught in a loop of, like, okay, what does my team need? How do I serve my employees? How do I help my agency? It's like, no, no, no. Like, everyone has a heartbeat, and they're all people, including you. And you need to figure out what is it that makes you tick and go deep. And that's why I love personal development, because once you start to understand the patterns of personal development and aspiration and inspiration and motivation, and you start to recognize that, yeah, we all have different variations of that. Yeah, we're all derivatives of a different, we all have different derivatives of that essence, but the essence is the same. And if you can learn how to tap into that, you can speak to a very broad audience and
Mhm.
pull, and you can captivate people into whatever your mission and whatever you're doing every day. Then it's not about insurance. We're not showing up to do insurance right now. We're showing up to do something way bigger. Insurance is just the vehicle in which we get to execute that. And that's cool because
Yeah.
now you get into recruiting, you get into speaking to a bigger audience, you get into more talented pool of candidates to draw from. You get into it just opens up a completely different new world, because now you're not pigeonholed to insurance. Because for the reality of the reality of the situation is, for the most people, when you hear that, they shut off. It's gone. But if you start talking about your mission, your values, and what you're doing, and you're able to antiquate that all together, all of a sudden it's like, okay, whatever we're doing, are we selling headlights? Cool, let's go sell a bunch
Yep.
of headlights. Who cares what it is?
Totally. Totally. So talk about um the structure a little bit of where you've gotten it to today. And again, I don't want everybody to think about this has been an evolution for you guys, right? So everybody needs to keep that in mind as to where, but I because I think the way you've structured it, at least as far as the last one that I remember, is very intentional on like the days and stuff. And
Sure.
I think it people can take a lot out of how you structured it and what you can, and then the theming and like,
Sure.
talk a lot about, if you don't mind, some of the personalization you guys put into it, because it's extremely thoughtful. And I would imagine some of that stuff, whether or not like people care they're getting a little trinket or whatever, it shows thoughtfulness on your part. Like, I
Sure.
understand you, and I know this little bit of thing about you that you put into the gift or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and maybe about how, I don't remember which partner it was, stamped 800 little dog tags or whatever it was
Yeah, that was
last
last
year.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was funny. That wasn't supposed to end up like that way. But if you're doing events, the
Yeah.
first thing is like nothing goes to plan, so you have to pivot. But um, yeah, I mean, I'll give you the structure of our 2 days. We do a 2 day segment for our general sessions. One is a full day. The second day is a half day. And it's the same format every time. There are some variations of in between times, but this is the format. We do what was, what is, and what's next.
Mm,
It's how it's been since the beginning of time. And we go through the history of the company, where it came from, the stories that are a part of that, because it's a success story. There are patterns involved with that. And everybody sitting in the audience is going through their own success story. So if they can see themselves through the filter of the company, they can learn from what has occurred and go, oh, okay, I can do that.
mhm,
Oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. Oh, it's way better today than it was back then. Oh, wow, it's a better opportunity today than it was back then, right? All these people are having success. Well, okay. So what was is a training on where you start, where you finish, all the challenges that occur in between, and can you see yourself in your cycle right now, and what can you borrow from that? So it's what was. And then what is basically a state of the company.
mhm.
Very simple, but what do we do this year? What are the wins? What are the losses? How'd we do? What are the benchmarks? What's the scorecard? What's the data? What are some recognition pieces? All that good jazz. And then we do recognition at the end of the first day. And so we do awards. One of our biggest awards is the Impact Award. It's a subjective award on the team member who's created the biggest impact within the
That's
organization.
awesome.
It has no data driven behind it, although it can have some data. But it is based upon culture, human connection, person who's a mission believer, has carried the torch, and has just made the biggest impact throughout the organization. And that's really cool, because it's been the top producer one year to a team member that doesn't have these huge data points that you would look at and
Yeah.
and map on a sheet. It comes down to their ability to contribute and make an impact with people smiling. It's like, it really is a really cool award that we've created around that. And then we end the day, and we do an event that night, and that event is always themed based upon the theme of the event. And again, the event, whether it's a cocktail party, whether it's an excursion, we've done scavenger hunts, we've done buses, we've done really cool stuff. It's always done in a way that supports the message of the event in an interactive, immersive way, which makes it really fun. And then on Saturday, we blow it out. And Saturday we have breakfast and show up for our second day session. And this year we did a live podcast with the
Well,
Impact Award winner from the front of the
nice.
stage, which is really cool. I think it'll drop next week. And we got to do Q&A with the team on their journey and where they came from and all that cool stuff, and
Yeah.
challenges. And so that was really cool. But if we have a guest speaker, sometimes they take that segment in the beginning, and then to end the event, I'll finish with a keynote, and that's what's next. And so it'll be talking about what we're going to do for the next year and years out, and then the message. What is that message that we want people to leave with? And that's all intertwined together. And then we have a family day Saturday, where all the families usually get in Friday night. They're not part of the Friday night event. That's only employees. But then Saturday is the family, and we'll usually set up, cornhole and tents, and we'll have drinks, and we'll cater some lunch, and we just hang, man, and we just have a good time, and everybody bonds and stuff like that. So this year was different because on Thursday, the day before, we bring in our core leadership team,
Yep.
and we have an event with them. We've always done that. And then they help us set up the room. So we're grooming the next leadership group to, how do you set up the room? How do you pack? How do you do the AV equipment? What goes where? What's important to prep? They're taking different projects as far as how it gets to the, because we bring all this stuff. We have all of it. We have a storage unit with everything. We've been doing it so long. So like, they're in charge of taking the different segments of execution. And it's a training opportunity for the, because hopefully one day we're not putting on the summit. The team is putting on the summit. That's the idea. So that's the night before, and we get to spend some intimate time with just them, and really talk about some cool stuff. And we have a whole thing planned for them and stuff. His segment of training was really cool. And then the day before that, we brought in our independent operators, which was Wednesday. And we had a full day training. We call it IO Day. And it's high level team building, recruiting, development, marketing. And then we had a really kick-ass event that night where we took a boat and we toured St. Augustine from the water, and it was catered dinner and all that cool stuff with a band on the boat, and it was just a cool opportunity for all these operators to come together and say, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you doing? What's going on in your market? So but it was 4 days. It's 4 days, it's back to back, it's all day. You're completely wiped when you leave. But man, just a really, it's very structured and it's very planned to the minute.
Yeah.
Which is important, but it's about the connection more than it is about the itinerary.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I know that you guys get very thoughtful with even your themes and the little things you do for people. But again, like that you guys have gotten to where this is a very big, sophisticated, you know, event, right? And but as we've talked, it wasn't always that way, right? And you
Nope.
were driving the same impact and all the stuff years ago. But what I'd like your perspective on, how much of the success that got you to where you're at today with 43 people having a 4-day summit, which is, everything that we just talked about, that people might look at and go, again, wow, once we're there, we'll do it.
Yeah.
How much of that would you equate to doing these types of summit and culture building events and things like that? Like how much of those things has impacted where you guys are at today?
It's literally everything. Someone says, what's the unique sauce of Urban Young? It's that. Like
Yeah.
it's the
I
team
figured you'd say
building.
that, but
It's the team building system that we've learned prior to this business that we just brought to the property and casualty business. And it's we have one of our mantras: get to the next live event. Get to the next live event, right? You never leave an event without promoting the next event. Like be here a year from now. That's a mantra. So like, there are these systems of team building that are have are literally what this entire company is founded on, and the principles that guide it. And a live event, a big marquee live event, is at the staple of that system. And so we just wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the summits. Like if it wasn't for us with 3 or 4 people hanging out and be like, what do we got to do a summit? If we would have missed those early years, It just, we wouldn't have the same company today. I'm not saying we
Mhm.
wouldn't be here. I'm not saying we wouldn't have success, but it certainly wouldn't have the type of spirit. It wouldn't have the makeup. It wouldn't have the type of, in my opinion, impact on people's lives that it's had, because what you're saying is that's not a priority. And so therefore, if you're not prioritizing it, you're not going to get the outcome of
Yeah.
that, right? Like,
Bingo.
if you want people to feel alive and excited and on fire and just would run through a brick wall for what you're doing, you have to make that a priority. You have to systematically create a process that's going to get those outcomes. And for us, it's always been that. So I just know for a fact that if we would have missed it when it didn't matter, quotations for people
Yeah.
that are listening, when it wasn't really needed, we would have killed it before it even started. And
Yeah.
so, like, again, you emphasize it, Elliot, but I mean, it's just like, if you're doing this, if you're listening to this and you're just saying, man, we need to do more of these, like after this podcast, just schedule it. Just schedule it 8, 9 months out. Pick a date, pick a time. You don't need to do 2 days. You don't need to do 4 days is crazy. Like, I
Yeah.
can't believe it did 4 days. Like, that's insane. It's just evolved to that. But do 1 day, and it's got to be off-site. Go off-site. Go somewhere, man.
Yeah.
Like, just get out of the office. Go somewhere cool. Go to a park. Spend the day just off-site with a huddle and do a cool experience where you recalibrate, and it doesn't need to be flashy. It's like saving money. Someone says, well,
Yeah.
when I make more money, I'll save money. No,
Yeah.
you won't. No, you won't, because you're not prioritizing saving money as important.
That's a great analogy.
Even if you're just saving $50 a month, you're just saying it's not important. And so the psychological impacts of you not making a priority are so detrimental to what you're trying to build. If it's important to you, not everybody wants to do that. Like, it's a lot. So that might not be your values. That might not be your mission. I totally get it. There's a lot of successful businesses that have their own uniqueness. So there's nothing right or wrong. But if you're listening to this and you're going, man, that's kind of cool, I'd like to do that. That would be awesome. It just, the habit is more important than the success of the event. You are going to not be good at first. Your
Yeah.
first couple events are just going to be whatever. But the pressure should be off to say it's not about how good the event is. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the practice of doing it. The first time you sold an insurance policy, you weren't good.
Yep.
But if you do it 1,000 times, you'll get good. And you might say, well, how did you get good? Well, you were bad before you were good. That's the process on anything.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm going to learn it and I'm going to be good and then I'm going to do it. No, you do the thing and you have the power, right? I think that's a Wolf. I think that's an Emerson quote. Wolf.
Ralph Waldo Emerson.
There you go. There you go. Do the thing and you'll have the power. Like,
Yeah.
get into the activity, get into the
I
work.
couldn't agree
And when
more.
you get into the work, it'll evolve.
Yeah. I just threw up a post saw a video of Alex Hormozy, if you're familiar with him,
Oh,
but
yeah.
he was talking about volume negates luck. And basically that's what he's saying is, like, you can't expect to be good at something until you've done it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Like, so don't even bother. Don't even bother evaluating. Don't even bother thinking about it. Just know you've got to put
Yes.
in 1,000 or whatever it is. If you're cold calling, like, he talks about his neighbor or something making 20 cold calls a day, and he's not, he was frustrated. He's not any good. And he's like, you come back and talk to me when you've made 200 calls a day for 4 years. Like, you're going to create more success by doing that. And then you're going to be good.
It takes a
And
lot of the relief. It takes a lot of it has a relief to that,
yeah,
because you think there's
absolutely.
something wrong with you, and it's like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're trying to be good. Why would you expect to be good when you haven't done the thing?
Yeah.
Why? Like, because you're benchmarking your success against the people that are doing it around you. You're trying to get feedback that you're good at something, so therefore it feels good to get into the activity. Like, just do it. Like, just be bad. Just
Yep.
have enough humility to be bad at anything for a long period of time. It's just that's not a sexy answer. That's an answer that sucks, because that means that there's no shortcut. That means that, those people are not better than you. They're not more talented than you. They're just more willing to put in the work than you. So
Yep.
it's like, but it also can be freeing to say, like, okay, cool. Well, then I'll just be bad long enough, and then at some point or
Yeah.
another, I'm going to be good.
Uh-huh. Exactly. So, well, and I ask that, I hope that people realize that, right? Like, you're going to see what you guys are doing and probably be a little jealous and probably have those feelings, but at the end of the day, the reason you guys are where you are at today is you were doing this when you couldn't put on a 4-day event. You were
Yeah.
still practicing that, exercising that muscle. And I think, you don't know the value of what you're doing today until you experience the result, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you're standing under a tree today because somebody planted it 20 years ago or
Yes.
whenever. And again, you're not going to
That's
be
such a
able to
good,
see that
yeah.
tree grow until you got to start planting. Um, and
Like,
so,
Elliot, I want to share this with the listener because I think that's such a valuable point. I was with somebody today and I was talking about this. It blew my mind. It took us 7 years to get to 4 employees. It was 3 partners and 4 employees after 7 years. 5 years later, it's 43 people.
isn't that wild?
So if you looked at if you looked at the revenue growth just from what happens in the first 7 years of doing these summits, of going to these events, of doing these things at the same intention that we're doing them today, right? Still being creative, still having themes, making a brand, doing the deal, being, putting your heart into it. It's nothing. Like it's you can't quantify it. And then all of a sudden, because you've done the thing for a long enough period of time, you've planted that tree, and now it's had the ability to grow, right? In 5 years, you 10x it. It's you could never draft it on paper to go that way, but that's how
Yeah.
it works. If you were to put a business plan together and you were to put this down on paper, you would never craft it that way. But that is just the life cycle of anything that's worthy. Just like the cold calls.
Yeah.
You're going to be bad for a long time, and then all of a sudden, you're
Boom.
not bad anymore. And all of your growth, 80% of your growth comes in the last 20% of the time, So I just, you hit it right on the head. Like you're not going to see the return, but if you stay in the game long enough, you won't be able to quantify the return. It's so big.
Yep. That's a powerful spot to, I think, wrap up, dude. And man, it's always fun when we just get on and
Yeah.
chat about this stuff a little bit because
Totally.
I think it's refreshing, and I hope everybody agrees that this is often an overlooked part of business, and it shouldn't be. It should be one of the most important pieces. But like I said, at the end of the day, we've all got to keep the lights on to a degree, and
Yeah.
that can sometimes take precedent. But I would encourage everybody to, like you said, just start it. Just schedule it. You'll figure it out. And even if you do a lunch, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Just put something into it and exercise that muscle, and you'll get better over time. And eventually you'll be having 4-day summits with, 43 to 100 people, and, be having the time of your life. So,
Yeah.
appreciate the time, dude. It's always fun. Got to get
Yeah.
together
You too,
soon,
man.
but, yeah, keep killing it.
I appreciate you. You keep killing it. Thank you so much, man. I always love these. So till next time.
That's right, buddy. See ya.
See you, bud.